This is a complicated time we're in. I'm not surprised about it. The truth embargo is in its 74th year of 1947, when General Roger Ramey told Jesse Marcel Sr., you need to come to Fort Worth Army Base and bring some of that debris that you found with you. And he did, got on a plane, flew right away. The press release about finding the saucer had gone out earlier that day. So he was on a plane, flew over there, got off, and the debris was taken from him. In other words, he handed it off, okay. And shortly thereafter, he was called into Roger Ramey's office to be involved in a press conference showing the debris, except that the debris was on the floor, was not what he brought from Roswell. It's not known if he said anything at the time. Don Schmidt would know, I guess, if he'd said anything to Roger, like General Ramey, I don't think that's the stuff I brought with me. I'm thinking he didn't say anything. He just held it up. They had some pictures. They put out another press release saying that the weather balloon, raw wind weather balloon. And for me, that was the beginning of the truth embargo. About the same time that was going on, by the way, Mac Brazel, who originally came across the wreckage outside of Roswell on the ranch that he was working, had been hauled in by the MPs, and he was being interrogated and held for 7 days or so, maybe a little bit more. And when he finally came out, and I forget the exact day, but again, it's right there at the same time frame, he had changed the story and gave different information, backing up what ultimately Ramey was going to be putting out later that day on the 8th. But apparently came into some money because he bought a brand new truck, and he had the money to move out of the area, which he did pretty quickly, and start a whole new business in another city. So that was happening too. So right around then, these two things together, to me, that's the beginning of the truth embargo, which is why a number of years ago, I, as a little project, tried to put out the idea that July the 8th would be Disclosure Day, capital D Disclosure Day. Wouldn't it be cool if the truth embargo ended on that day, since it began on that day, close the circle? And so if you go to worlddisclosureday.org, I think, worlddisclosureday.org, you can actually see what I have up about that. It didn't become a big thing. UFO Day is far more followed, but I get that. So we're approaching the 74th year. That's a lifetime, one full lifetime. And it's about to end, finally. And we'll talk more about that. But I just want to say this, that of all the people out there, if you want to just pick groups of people who have been, how would you say, negatively impacted by the truth embargo, I think you got to go with the contactees. Certainly,
absolutely.
The military people who saw things and did involvement in things, who could never speak about it the rest of their life, yeah, that bothered them. Milton Torres, when he was finally able to talk about his extraordinary encounter when he was flying a intercept over the English Channel way back, and was told to never talk about it again, and he never did until finally he came out. It was 2009, I think. Might have been 2010, I'm not sure. And he was he really cried. I mean, he could not present the story and talk about it without breaking down. And he was finally able to tell his story at a press conference held at the end of one of my ex-conferences. His son was there to help him. His health was not good. He lived a couple more years and he died, but he was able to get that story out. But that's military people. That's one thing. But
and in that case too, it just basically observing something and not having actual contact with who the hell is flying these things.
That's right. a little more than observing. He was told to shoot it down.
Yeah.
So he
Back in
had
those
kind of a
days.
moment of truth there, right?
Hmm.
Because as he described so well, at some point he knows he's got the order to shoot it down, but on his radar screen it is showing up as roughly the size of an aircraft carrier. So he's been told by either the British Air Force or the American Air Force, probably American Air Force, that are stationed there, we need you to shoot at this flying aircraft carrier. And I kind of imagine that was a little stressful. But interestingly enough, before he could exercise or execute an attack, probably a missile attack, it took off at great speed. So it was not only a flying aircraft carrier, it was a very rapidly flying aircraft carrier. So he was off the hook. He went back, and the next day he was met by men in civilian clothes who explained to him why he would never talk about this as long as he lived. Okay, fine. Contactees is different. We know. I mean, I'm sure your audience is. I don't want to educate them on that. They know it, but there are people that have had to deal with the ETs directly.
Absolutely.
I think it's millions.
Yes.
Going back, if you want to, at any given time, I don't know how many, but I'm saying going back decades, millions.
Yeah.
And
What was it? 91. The Roper organization did a poll at the behest of Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, where they basically came up with a number of like 6 million people back in those days that were in contact with these extraterrestrials, or non-human intelligence is the byword these days.
yeah, and I think see, 10% of 300 million is 30 million. 1% is 3 million. 6 million is 2%. There have been several surveys that have been done too. It's kind of like a polling, but it's kind of like a survey where people answer questions that the answers could indicate that they're contact. I mean, if they don't know it, maybe, but they've had experience, and there's been some numbers higher than 2%. But I've gone with the 2% number. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's wrong by half, 1%.
It's still a lot of people.
That's a lot of people, right? And I actually, there's on my website, there is under projects, there is a section called the contact equation. And I put together an equation, eventually with the assistance of an astronomer named Spear. I forget his first name, I'm very sorry. He helped to put it in a kind of a scientific context. I tried to calculate an equation that how many saucers would it take to service X number of contactees, right? And it was like the Drake equation. It had various different variables, right?
Yeah.
And you put it all together and you multiply it out, you get a number. And it came down to about 20 per state in the U.S. That's all. 20 per state would be enough to account for 6 million, 2%. That's interesting. But in any event, we know that a significant percentage have no memory at all. That doesn't mean they don't have issues. They may have issues, but they have no memory, so they cannot connect the issues in their life with the experiences. We know that some have very good memories, and they're affected, as well. We know that some have had suspicion and have gone and tried to capture memories by hypnotic regression, and so forth. And there hasn't been enough money to do a survey that breaks all of that out. We also know that there have been hundreds of thousands of written accounts submitted to researchers. The number could easily be 1 million or more. These accounts are in letters and emails in the files of researchers. It would make for a hell of a survey to go through all of them, categorize all of them, break them down into all the various ways you would to get a sense of what has been reported. But this is a multi-million-dollar effort.
Well, and people have taken a stab at this. Ray Hernandez did the free study, and somewhere close to 4,000 people responded to a questionnaire. back in 2009, myself and a Dr. Lelouvre interviewed 71 people that said that they were abductees and 51 people as a control. And we basically found none of them had any psychopathology. They weren't fantasy prone.
Yeah.
They had some differences in their temporal lobe activity, which is interesting. And actually, I'm in the process right now with a Russ Scalpone who did a lot of the statistics for the free study. We're about to do the omega-4 study, where we're actually going out to therapists and then ultimately to their clients to look at this topic once again, because there is a lot of missing information that needs to be put out there. And so we hope to publish this probably sometime next year.
It is very laudable that a lot of civilian have formed organizations and tried to do the best research they could on a topic that the government says doesn't exist, and without any money. I mean, I don't believe any college government funding was available, or philanthropic funding. There have been a few instances of that, but overall, they have to somehow pull the money together. So they have minimal resources.
Exactly. That's true. I'll raise my hand to that.
Yeah, but they did it. You know, they're doing what the colleges, universities should be doing, but of course they don't acknowledge that they're not going to in any way bother the government with this. So they stay silent. It's a disgrace, but that's what they've done. So, but that has happened. But obviously, this is something that deserves far, far more expansive engagement than civilians have done. And it would require the full-out investigation. And I'm talking about a survey of every report that's been submitted to get the maximum understanding and call out the core information so that we could properly address it. That's coming.
Well, I think the first step is this report that's coming out. I mean, it's a process that's going to be ongoing. Well, first of all, we figure out, okay, these things are not ours. They're probably not the Russians or the Chinese. So what's left? You know, is it something from somewhere else, or is it interdimensional, or is it something that's always been here? It's part of our world, if you will. And then the next step is, okay, if that's the case, then who are these people? And who better to ask than the people that have been abducted or had these experiences?
Right.
And
but they're not going to be on the menu. They're not going to be in the menu as the disclosure process is going to proceed without them. And there are legitimate reasons for this. So again, the just close out the point I was making is that one of the reasons why this work must continue, one of the reasons why we must succeed in ending this embargo is because of those millions of people who have had the experience and are on it, and it's not acknowledged. And they have suffered. They've been studied for pathologies like, okay, are you crazy? A lot of that's been done. But there's been very, very little work on that I'm aware of. It may be that Free has gone there, I don't know. In terms of, well, okay, but have you suffered because of this? How has it affected your life? Has it created problems for you? That's a whole different thing than I'm crazy and I'm seeing things that aren't there. You know, I've talked with enough contactees to have a good sampling of the kinds of trauma and PTSD it can create. Right. And the kinds of ways it can disrupt lives and ways that you wouldn't think about, but actually, once you learn, you go, wait a minute, oh yeah, I can see how that happened. So this is one of the reasons I do what I do, and so forth. Okay, so now let's get to what's going down. What is happening is, and again, this is my assessment as someone that has always viewed this from a political perspective and an activist perspective. I'm not a research trying to tie down exactly what day some event happened and who was actually there and what did they really see and were there burn marks on the guy. That's not me.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the big picture from a political standpoint. I'm looking at the history of disclosure, the history of the embargo and all of that, and trying to put anything that happens in that context. So what's happening is that finally, enough people within our military intelligence complex, I use this term neutrally, have came to the personal conclusion that it was time for the embargo to end. Time to end it. What to do, though? All right.
How to end
Not
it.
easy. Okay. How does a government get out from how are you without being able to do it officially? How can the government move forward and come out from under a 75-year misrepresentation of reality, whatever the reasons, which were national security and legal? It wasn't an illegal activity, it wasn't criminal. How do you do that?
That's
It's not easy, right?
no, no, that's a conundrum of sorts.
There's a lot of potential downsides to this. A lot of oxes could be gored, a lot of pain, a lot of awkward moments, all that kind of stuff. So not easy, which is one of the reasons this lasted so long. We all know about this. It's just something needs to be done, but nobody is really willing to put up with the grief that's going to come from getting it done. And so they just don't do it. I get it. Okay, fine. But this is a national issue and it's a government problem, and the government is paid by the taxpayers who they are supposed to serve. Now, there are those that have lost that concept. They feel the taxpayers deserve to pay them and should be happy with whatever the hell they want to do. You paid me to be here, you elected me, and so you've given me a certain informator, and I'm going to do what I want, and you're going to like it. Well, we need to get rid of all of those people. Somehow or another, they need to go, whatever, fire them, retire them, unelect them, whatever the hell. We have way too many of them, and they're a huge problem for the country. So disclosure doesn't matter how hard it is. It doesn't matter how awkward it will be. They have to do it, period. And if they can't do it, quit. And let somebody else come in, maybe they'll do it. So, okay, but having said that, look, I totally respect the fact that a lot of very good people who have defended us and worked at modest salaries, rich, and have observed this policy and conducted this policy, gone along with it, or certainly not objected to it, would like to see this unfold in a way that was minimally damaging to them, their agency or service, the government as a whole, and perhaps minimally disruptive to the American people who pay their check. I respect that. And that's what they're trying to do. Okay, that's good. That's a good thing. That's a good part.
You know what?
Yeah.
I was going to say that the Pentagon has had some real issues, already with, I guess it was Chris Sherwood coming out and saying Lou Elizondo had nothing to do with ATIP. And then Susan Gall saying, well, he had some assigned things, but, so he did have some responsibility. And then they came back and said, well, we're not really sure. I mean, they were all over the place on this thing.
Yeah, I need to parse this for you. There's two things in a way happening together. All right. There is a plan that has been put into effect that has a specific goal. All right. Being conducted along the lines that I just mentioned, which is let's end this thing, but let's try to make it as painless as possible, right? I mean, everybody's that way, okay? Doctor says, you got a problem here, okay? We're gonna have to go in and operate. And you're saying, okay, what are my options here? What's the least painful? And how's your anesthetist? Because I don't wanna feel anything. I wanna wake up and like $1 million with a couple of OxyContin sitting at the table next to them. Everybody knows that. Okay, so that's happening. But at the same time, there's a second thing happening, because this what is going on is not an official act of the United States government. This isn't the Pentagon and the CIA and the NSA and maybe some member of Congress and member of the White House getting together and say, let's plan to end the truth embargo. No, that's not what's happening. This is a privately initiated program with support from inside the military intelligence complex, from people who have their back, but they cannot act. Boy, I'm a poet. Okay, and what am I talking about? In other words, a group of people decided we need to see if we can end this truth embargo. It's not going to be easy. And they're working for the government. They're in the CIA. They're in Department of Defense. They're working various aspects of research. They're under national security arrangements and classifications, and they have NDAs. So could they just suddenly go to the New York Times and say, wow, look what we got here, right? Wow, you're going to like this interesting story. You see, that's not going to work. They're going to jail. They're going to be fined. Their lives are going to get really bad. It's not going to be good at all. And it's illegal. So can't do it. Now you may say, well, but that's what whistleblowers do. This isn't a whistleblower thing. This is one of the great misnomers in terms of language, which offends me. The people that are doing this are not whistleblowers. Why? Because whistleblowers reveal illegal activity going on within their workplace, and they come forward to the press because the workplace will not resolve the issue. These are the policy of truth embargo is not illegal. It's a national security policy. It's completely legal. And so what they are witnesses. And so what are you going to do? You're going to go to the New York Times? Hey, you're going to jail. So they can't do that. I get it. No problem. I do not have a beef there. But over the lunch tables at the DOD, maybe at a local restaurant in the evening over some drinks, these people started talking to each other, saying, what could we do? This thing has gone on and on and on, and it needs to end. And they came up with a plan, and it was a good plan. What if a number of highly credentialed, experienced careerists working across the military intelligence complex were no longer working for the government anymore? They were essentially retired, or at least have separated. Doesn't mean they don't have non-disclosure, just means that they're not under the government payroll. What if they, as civilians, were to be part of a new organization, civilian organization? Right? Well, at that point, assuming they don't break any NDAs, there's a lot of things they could do that they couldn't do when they were working with, under the government payroll. And they came up with the idea of creating that organization, which eventually came out in October of 2017. It had an interesting name, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. It had an interesting CEO, musician Tom DeLonge, which kind of sounds, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't sound particularly threatening, does it?
No.
To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, run by a rock star. I mean, hey, right? It doesn't sound black ops to me. It doesn't sound like some sort of mind control, whatever the hell, right? It sounds okay. It's interesting. But then when you read the resumes of the people on the initial team, you go, wait a minute.
Impressive.
This is something else. Well, when I read those resumes, I knew exactly what it was. It was a private entity. It was going to do things very quickly that were going to advance this issue. Because at that point, it was clear to me that for the first time since Roswell, the disclosure movement, the activist movement to get the confirmation of the ET presence from the president was being led by the military intelligence complex by proxy. Now think about that. That's a whole new level here. It's places I could not go. It could do things I could not do. Right? Most of the people in the field, there are some people in the field that had resumes. Certainly Edgar Mitchell had a substantial resume. And he flat out said, Roswell happened and the ETs are here. Wasn't enough. And there are others that have had this resume. So I assure you, I never walked on the moon. So I was going to have an even more difficult time shaking the tree. So, but this was different. These people are freshly minted civilians right out from the military intelligence complex across the board. Anything you can imagine, they got it all covered. All kinds of, not paranormal, all kinds of exotic research, skunk work, CIA, DOD, intelligence committee work on the Hill. It all was there. And I'm going, okay. And so I said, I was in the UK when it happened. Unfortunately, I wish I hadn't left the country, but I did after the election. And I said, well, the next thing they do is going to pretty much determine or demonstrate how profound this is. They did not disappoint, because the next thing that happened, there was some news coverage and the odd statement or two, mostly from Tom DeLonge, we learned that they had walked the story into the New York Times. There are a number of people involved. Hasn't been a lot of discussion about the particulars, but one way or another, the story got waltzed into the New York Times, which of course then vetted it heavily and concluded it's all true. And they published the two articles, December 16th, 2017.
17, yeah.
And that was all I needed to know. Mm-hmm. This was not only serious, this thing was hyper serious. And we had crossed the Rubicon at that point. The disclosure movement was now never going to retreat. It was never going to be distracted. It was a straight path from December 16th to the end of the truth embargo, with a timing somewhat dependent upon certain political developments, and as it turned out, pandemic developments. Yeah, there's always something, right?
What happened with the To the Stars Academy, with Lou leaving and Steve leaving, and internal issues?
I don't think so.
No,
they haven't said. But I'm going to speak for them.
Oh, good. I like that.
The way I see it, if I get something wrong in my analysis, which is limited because obviously they're not saying they're not talking about the origin story. They're not giving the background details because they can't. They can't get into those details because now we'd be exposing people inside the military intelligence complex that are still working there.
Right.
So we have to fill in the blanks. I'll fill in the blanks at any time. They can give me a call and say, Steve, you got that wrong. That's not what happened. I go, okay, fine. What happened?
Yeah, what happened?
And they're probably going to say, well, I can't
tell you.
Okay. And my answer to that is, I understand completely. But until you can tell me what happened, I'm going to continue to say what I think happened.
Right.
All right. So to answer your question, and we're bouncing around here a lot, but I'll answer your question. To answer your question, you need to understand, in my view, what the agenda was. What was the point of all this? These high-level people with full-blown careers, why did they create an organization that was going to come under immediate, intense scrutiny in an issue that had a 75-year reputation of being a third rail of American politics, much more electrified than the Social Security thing, I assure you, that was not going to pay well, if at all, risk their legacy, their credibility? Why? So they would have something to do in their retirement as a hobby? Why would they do this? unless the agenda was very, very worth it. And what that agenda was, in my view, is this thing was launched with the intention that it would be the spearhead that would finally get the congressional hearings that are necessary to properly end the truth embargo.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question about the hearings, whether that was hopefully an eventual outcome, and it sounds like that's the case.
Oh, and they're coming very soon.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's the plan. All right, but okay, fine. How are you going to get the hearings? What are you going to do? How do you get those hearings? What are you going to do that everybody before you was not able to do? And there have been many attempts to get hearings since the last one in 1968, which was a one-day show hearing, so the Congress can say, hey, we took some testimony, wasn't convincing, and shut down Blue Book, get the Condon report, and get out from under the whole thing and just be able to not be bothered for the next 40 years, which didn't quite work out, but they did get about 8 years of relief, and then it blew up to hell again. So anyway, so nobody could do this. There have been efforts to get hearings, I assure you. They've all, nothing.
Fizzled.
Now, so what are they going to do that's different? Well, first you go to the New York Times and you get those stories in play. And then you create an unidentified, you create a series on History Channel, 14 episodes of Unidentified Inside America's Secret UFO Investigation, to bring witnesses out and get it more into play. You give limited interviews initially, but you slowly expand, all right? And clearly you're increasing public awareness, you're getting bigger and bigger press involved, all good. So, okay, but why didn't that just happen? Why, okay, fine, boom, boom, bang, boom, boom, and there you are. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is non-trivial. You see, I am convinced that To the Stars Academy was not supposed to launch in October of 2017. It was supposed and set up to launch in November, December, maybe early January of 2017, or December of 2016, after the election of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, president. That's the game plan. And then, while she was fending off questions from scores of reporters about all the things and she said about ET issue during the campaign, I take full responsibility for that. And Podesta and her husband and Obama, all of that, hundreds of articles were written. While she's fending off those questions, I got to form a government first, then we'll talk. I can talk to you, but I need to get the government together. And that goes on. In the middle of that drops the New York Times articles. Oh boy. And now, as she walks into the White House, all of this ttsa activity and the New York Times articles and all that press, combined with the attention that she's going to be getting from the press over her comments, she is perfectly positioned to move aggressively to end the truth embargo right then and there in the early months of her administration, which I believe she had made the decision she was going to do no later than when she left the White House in 2001, after her husband had been diminished, demeaned, attacked, undermined, disrespected, stonewalled, and then handed a multi-million-dollar, completely bogus Air Force report on the Mogul balloon. And that was after, of course, the Rockefeller Initiative was ended.
Right.
But the issue was still alive and moving forward. And so they never relented on her husband. They went after him until they finally got him on Monica Lewinsky, which they turned into one of the greatest scandals in the history of the human race. So they pretty much neutered him, locked him down. You're not going to get those files. You're not going to be the disclosure president. Screw you, screw Rockefeller, screw Podesta, screw your wife. We don't care. Screw you. That's basically what they did. And so when she left the White House, she was mad as hell and fully intent on being president. And it got worse because The Rockefeller Initiative obviously was shut down leading into the second term election, which he won, which made him a lame duck president, by the way. So after all the crap that went down, now he's a lame duck president, second term, can't run again. So that's another reason why the attacks were vicious and continued, because now the guy could do it. He could come at, I mean, the president could end the truth embargo anytime they wanted to. A lot of people say, no, they tried and they failed. No. They made an effort. They were stonewalled and decided they did not want to break that wall down. But any president could have ended the truth embargo anytime they wanted to. So after Clinton, Gore was supposed to win. He looked pretty good. Clinton presidency went fairly well. Gore was very popular, fully experienced, far more experienced to be president than Clinton was when he won his election. And so there was likelihood that Gore, the vice president, would become the next president, and he would, of course, be a Democrat. So there was an option on making a move on this during a Gore administration. Because if they did, even though her husband was basically stonewalled, there's no question that if it all comes out under Gore, with the assistance of the Clintons, they're going to be significantly grandfathered into the legacy. They're going to be major factors historically in making this happen. Gore will be the disclosure president, but the platform was set for it by Hillary and Bill and John Podesta during their effort, which was blocked. But then Gore loses the election by one vote. One vote. In fact, one of the most bizarre elections of all time, which only made them matter, particularly her. Right? So now, what happens after that? Not much. You go 8 years under the Bush administration, and there were some things we tried to get going. We had our moments, but they were interrupted by history. 9/11, the Iraq War, what have you. So there was not going to be any disclosure under Bush. And during that period, Secretary of State Clinton had nothing to say, and her husband virtually had nothing to say. He did say something in 1995 while he was over in Hong Kong. But the person that kept having something to say was John Podesta. John Podesta, of course, was absolutely part of their team. And so in those 8 years, it was John Podesta that kept dropping breadcrumbs, keeping the connection between the Clintons and the ET issue alive. He never left their camp. This was not some independent thing he was doing. And so 8 years go by, and her chance to become president arrives. And I was very optimistic. I said, I think I know what she's going to do. And so I tried, get something going, try to get the media involved. But before I could really get anything going in that area, she was losing the primaries. And so she was out of the picture. And we have another person that's running who wins the election, Obama. So 8 more years go by. I won't get into the history of that. It's interesting. But the second time around, Hillary Clinton was a lock. She had it sewed up. Obama presidency, she was Secretary of State, she's been a senator, she's a woman, there's never been a woman president. She has got it locked up. The Republican candidacy slate is in disarray. They are not impressive at all. And so we're heading towards a Clinton administration. That, coupled with all of the articles that were turning up all over the country in major publications, set a clear message to these individuals inside the military intelligence complex who were already disposed. It was time to end the truth embargo to, we got to get on our bicycles and start pedaling here. In other words, we can't put off our efforts or a project to maybe help this along, because if we do, it's going to happen without us.
Yeah, there'll be.
And that's a problem. Why? It's a simple equation. A new president takes over. That president is not going to put up with any nonsense. not going to buy in any of the bullshit that comes from the Air Force, the DoD, or anybody else. That president is going to get disclosure. Boom. That's what's going to happen. And you may say, well, how? It's not hard. Not Trump. Carter could have done it. Clinton could have done it. Bush could have done it. Pick a president. How do you do it? How do you end the truth embargo? You're the president. It's simple. You call all of the most top people in the Pentagon, including your appointees, you into the White House for a discussion. And they show up. Okay, they don't say, I'm sorry, I'm out of town that way. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I can't attend, but maybe next time. No, they show up. And you don't even let them sit. They stand in front of the Resolute desk. And here is what the president says to these fine people, mostly men, there might be the odd woman. So particularly if it's a woman president, this is even more satisfying. You say, in 60 days, you will provide me with a complete assessment of all USAP programs related to the ET issue, state of research, who is running them, the extent of our files on the subject, and a summary of our fundamental knowledge of what we know about this phenomenon going back to 1947, including the actual records of the Roswell event. And you'll have that to me in 60 days. And if you do not bring that, I am going to fire every single one of you. You're all going to lose your job. And then I'm going to replace you with people and
We'll get
ask
it
them
done.
the same thing.
Yep.
It's that simple. And you may say, oh, well, no. They're going to say, Miss President, Ms. President, look, this is too important for it to be out of our hands. You don't really have a need to know. You can't handle the truth. They'll be fired right then. They won't even get a chance to report. They're done. They're finished. They're gone. The President of the United States has enormous power. The question is how and when and if they use it. And so that's it.
Mm-hmm.
She gets it. She gets it in 60 days. And then she reviews it and goes and announces the ET presence. But you see the problem here? The problem is this. One, the military intelligence complex, no part in it until they were literally threatened with extinction. And then they coughed it up. Okay, now the president announces. And the world is shaken. And people have a million questions. Why now? Why not then? Who hid what? What's going on? You know what the politician's going to say? The president's going to say? The Senate leaders are going to say? They're going to say, we really would love to tell you the truth. We tried, we could not get anything. The Air Force stonewalled us, the Pentagon lied to us. The military industrial complex is responsible for this entire fiasco. That's what they're going to say. And so they're going to throw the military intelligence complex under the bus with pleasure. And they weren't thrilled about that. Okay?
Yeah, Eisenhower warned us about it. So
So that's it. That's about as far as it goes. So they don't see themselves as the enemies of the state.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see themselves as they've protected the country and they've defended the country and they've done a pretty good job. We're still here. And so what do you do? Well, you get ahead of the issue. You get out in front. You already want to be on board the disclosure train. So when the president finally, gets in the cab and the train takes off, you're already on board. And so that project, which eventually came to be called the To the Stars Academy, was a public relations project of sort, in the sense that if she discloses, we're already involved, we're already out there, we're already helping, this is going to make it a hell of a lot easier on us, not to mention the fact if we don't do anything, and she does call us all into the White House and tells us 60 days, it's going to make it even worse. I mean, literally, what the press will write is that the military intelligence complex, which is stonewalled umpteen presidents, actually had to be threatened with extinction in order to finally come up with the damn truth. It's a shitstorm for the military intelligence complex. And so they took action, except she lost. She lost. And political chaos ensued. Everything went up in the air. The new president had no connection to the issue, no knowledge of the issue. What in the hell do you do? I mean, I have enormous sympathy for everyone involved.
Yeah, you start from square zero.
Yeah, and do you do it at all? Do you just disband it? You just let it go? What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it took them 11 months to make the decision that we will go forward anyway, knowing that this was going to be a much longer journey. And how are we going to keep the team together? They weren't able to raise that much money initially because, again, the election went a different way. And so when they finally came out, they only were able to raise about $2.5 million. What do you do? They decided to go forward, try to raise what they could. They raised $2.5 million, and they went to the New York Times. Okay, so fine. They've essentially got ahead of the issue. Good. Was that it? Was that, okay, we've done something. Now we'll just sit back, and when it happens, but we can say we helped. No. Their agenda was bigger than that. Their agenda was, okay, now we're ahead of the issue. Now let's go get disclosure. Let's make it happen. And so what was the agenda? We're going to get hearings. And how do you get hearings? You got to do two things, and hearings are critical. I'll tell you why later, but hearings are absolutely critical to this. Two things you got to do. You've got to brief all of the appropriate members of Congress that you have time to get to about what the hell's going on, so that they can make an informed decision about whether to hold hearings or not. That's the first thing. You got to do that. And secondly, you've got to have witnesses. You just can't say, let's hold some hearings on this. And okay, let's do it. Where are the witnesses? Well, we'll start looking for them, right? We'll see if we can find some. No. You've got to be lining them up simultaneously. You've got to be able to say at the right time to a committee chair, we've got 25 witnesses that are relevant to these hearings ready to go. Go through the list, pick out the ones you want, and they're ready to testify. And so as things move forward, 2018, 2000, so forth, 19, what I'm looking for, is there any indication that that is happening? Well, guess what? Yeah, there was. By the end of 2019, as we move toward 2019, actually by middle of 2019, I already knew two things. I knew that Mellon was taking witnesses up on the Hill and giving briefings to members of Congress. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't focusing on the Agricultural Committee. He was focusing on the intelligence committees, right?
Right.
How many, we don't know. We just know a few mentioned it. They did mention it. But there was time enough, more than enough time, in 2018 and 2019 for Mellon to brief 20, 30, 40 members of key committees. Elizondo were in some of those meetings, we believe. And then in July is when I found out that one of the similar type briefing involving Nimitz witnesses, things like that, was given to the president. No surprise. They were briefing both Republican and Democratic members of Congress. And so you can imagine a Republican member of Congress gets a briefing, he's going to call up the White House, talk to his connection there and say, I just got a briefing on this issue. Has the president been briefed? And of course they're going to, no. And so they're going to have to brief the president. They did. That's when I picked up stakes in California and moved back to Washington to do everything I could to get set up, because I realized it wasn't going to be long when the party was going to get started. And I need to get all set up, dressed and tanned and ready and rested. So I came back in July. Those meetings continued, but there was something else I knew about. I knew that if you watched how Lou Elizondo was operating, if you watched all of it To the Stars, the unidentified episodes, for all 14 of them on the History Channel, what you saw was a process underway in which Lou Elizondo was checking out witnesses, lots of witnesses, and all military witnesses. Some of them turned up in the unidentified series, some were in silhouette. And also, I learned that, and this shouldn't shock anybody, between the New York Times article and the unidentified series and all the press coverage across the country, amongst the thousands and thousands of retired military intelligence and even perhaps defense contractor people worked, saw, engaged the issue in one form or fashion, like David Fravor, the pilot. They recognized that the bar for coming forward without risk had been substantially lowered. Nothing was happening to these witnesses. They were doing just fine. In fact, they were getting treated like royalty. And so they felt, I've got a major story myself. What do? Do I go down to the New York Times and knock on the door and say, I got a story? Interview me. No. You contact Lou Elizondo. Of course you do. His email was known. The sense I get is there scores and scores and scores of contacts were made by people who had something to offer. And so for 2 years, Lou Elizondo had the opportunity, if he was using it, and I'm 98% certain that's exactly what he was doing, to vet scores of military witnesses, well beyond what we have seen. So briefings on the Hill, witness accumulation, what's going on? They're getting ready for hearings. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, okay, so anything after that that happens that supports that theory, I'm paying very close attention to. Well, a number of weeks ago, as you mentioned, see, I eventually always get around to the question, right? I'm not a bullet point kind of guy. You know,
I like that.
I learned that Louis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and Steve Justice stepped out of the TTSA. They're no longer part of the TTSA. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that. There was a dispute, right? There was no money, right? They couldn't take it any longer, whatever. And so there were all kinds of speculations on that. But none of that has emerged, none of that at all. And so why would they step out of the TTSA at that point? I think I have a simple explanation. They had done all the necessary preparatory work, and it's a lot of work, to be able to support hearings. And things were moving along quite nicely. And so we were rapidly approaching the point where actual negotiations of the hearings would take place. It's one thing to brief a member of Congress, hey, it'd be a good idea to hold a hearing. I think you're right. And it's another thing to say you've got the witnesses, but now you want to hold the hearings. That has to be worked out. What witnesses? Which committee? What's the way to go about it? Just the back and forth that allows these hearings to be taking place in a proper context. And obviously, Mellon and Elizondo were absolutely the appropriate people that should be involved in that process, working with committee staffers to make these hearings happen and happen correctly. Well, look, the committee staff is not going to be thrilled with negotiating with an organization. In other words, okay, we're all going to work with the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences to work out the details of the hearings. The To the Stars Academy of Sciences, which is a public benefit corporation with a multi-tiered mission statement and other people involved, and a really good rock star is a CEO and whatever. This is not the way you want to go about it.
Right.
So what you do is you step out and you become a civilian again. And so Louis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon were going to be working with those staff, in my opinion, as civilians with their bona fides, of course. That's cool. But why Justice. That was the thing I wasn't sure about. Why justice? Now, understand, I've never called up any of these people and asked for an answer because I don't think I would get an answer, and I don't want to get in their way, right? They want to enlighten me, they will. So, but my speculations are not trivial, and they're grounded in understanding, and I'm prepared to be wrong on some of this, and that's okay. It can easily be corrected. Why justice? Well, I believe that the witnesses at these initial hearings are going to be military witnesses. They're the best witnesses you can have. You do not want any civilian witnesses, whatever their background, because military witnesses, these are men and women who signed an oath to serve their country when they signed up. They have fully understandable careers, vetted, documented, except there may not be access to some classified work they've done, but it's on record. I mean, in there, they're completely vettable, and then they sit down and take another oath in front of the chair. Does anybody really think they're going to sit there and lie? They're going to come up with some cockamamie story? No, they are the best possible witnesses. However, there is another group of witnesses that would also be pretty strong, but they're not military. They are individuals working for defense contractors, working on highly classified government programs under contract with the Department of Defense or other agencies, subject to the same NDAs and classification security status. Now, they haven't turned up. It's a much more difficult matter for any of these types of people to come forward like Elizondo did and Fravor and these others. This is a little tougher, but it could happen. And who would be the best person to address that, deal with that, possibly help make that happen? Well, a former associate director of the Skunk Works, of course.
Yeah, Justice.
Justice. And so I'm thinking that's why he stepped out. And so again, all of this just cemented, in my view, that we were headed for hearings. Okay. And if we get the hearings, the embargo ends. I'm just going to be very clear about that. Now, when I say hearings, I don't mean the one-day, four-person testimony of 1968. Right. No, I'm talking hearings. I'm talking many witnesses, many days, multiple committees with hundreds of millions of people glued to their television set. I'm talking about those kinds of hearings. End of truth embargo. It's only a matter of time. So, in the middle of all this, though, something happened that was very interesting. Again, which helped to support my thinking, but it was a political move by one of the people that was briefed by Mellon. And I'm talking about Marco Rubio. Now, I'm pretty sure Mellon and some witnesses briefed the entire Senate Intel Committee. Might have been briefed the entire House Intel Committee. Don't know, but it wasn't just Rubio. And we know they'd also briefed Warner. I think he briefed the whole Intel Committee. And anyway, but Rubio was the chair. And we're talking 2020. And so, and this was early on. In June of 2020, Rubio made a very interesting maneuver, which from a political standpoint makes complete sense. He's a smart man. I mean, I'm sure he got this briefing, and if he didn't already know, I figured it out. He figured out, yeah, this is extraterrestrial, and that's going to eventually be the play here, but we got to get hearings, but this is big. I mean, anybody on the Hill that thinks that the confirmation of extraterrestrial presence is not big, that it doesn't measure up to some of the other huge issues they're addressing, they need to stop smoking whatever they're smoking. Okay, I mean, they need to change some of their personal habits. So he does a brilliant maneuver, possibly with or without the cooperation or help of Warner. He puts language in the Defense Intelligence Appropriations Bill in the comment section, not the enumerated legal part, which is like under law, this is what has to happen. It's a request from the Intelligence Committee in the comment section to the Department of Defense and particularly the ONI, its UAP task force, and other entities to deliver some analysis and information. And it's all enumerated there. It's fairly comprehensive, but it's not everything. It's serious. And it puts that in the bill so that when it's passed under the language, these entities within the military intelligence complex had 180 days to deliver this information. 6 months, plenty of time. Now, he probably knew in June that bill wasn't going to get signed right away. And it didn't. It didn't get signed until December, which is why the deadline is June 25. And by the way, obviously that would be after the election, right? So it's a non-issue until the election's over. It got some press early on, but it kept getting more and more press. But Rubio wasn't running in 2020, so even that maneuver could have no impact on his political prospects. And I assure you, he wants to be president of the United States. And so in one simple maneuver, Rubio got right out in front of this issue in a big way, and he has gotten a lot of press about that because, I chronicle all the press, and then I put it up on my website. I'm up to 12,000 articles. 1,000 of them deal with a UAP issue and to ttsa and all that's been unfolding. 1,000. You can read them all. Probably take a week. And so he's ahead of the issue, getting great press. And by the way, if you're a member of the Senate and you're doing something that's getting you great press, meaning not just from your side, but in general, that's a hell of an accomplishment.
That's gold.
He pulled it off. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is set up on this. Okay, great. And so the report is in play. The election takes place, and a new party wins the White House. A new party wins the Senate. A new party wins the House. So we have a sea change, political sea change, which Rubio would have known was going to be very conducive to holding hearings. He would have known that. He is not a stupid man. And so, as it turns out, the prospects improved dramatically that they could actually get hearings underway. So, anticipating that language had a dual effect, a dual consequence, because you can't give a member of Congress or a member of a committee in Congress, House or Senate, enough protection, political protection to, and this is the case of the committee chairs, who are the ones that call for hearings. That's who they call for, not the president. The committee chairs call for hearings. Otherwise, you don't get it. To call for hearings on an extraordinarily complex, controversial issue, you can't give them enough political protection. Now, obviously, everything that's happened over the last 3 years, the New York Times articles, all the rest of the coverage, everything that's happened has helped to provide that protection. But what if there was going to be a report, however broad, whatever, but a substantive report, a legitimate report that was going to be delivered to the Congress on June the 25th? What would happen? Well, for one thing, it would attract a lot of media. This is the kind of thing the media loves to follow, right? You got a headline, and there it is.
Throw the red bead out there.
Boom, 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 boom. And then the public, give the public 6 months to get excited about something. They'll get excited about something.
Sure.
And so the excitement is building, the press coverage is building, it is drawing a great deal of attention. And then when that report is delivered, and I assure you, this report is going to be the Condon report, okay, of 1969. No, it's not going to be that. It's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to certainly raise the national security issues. It's going to provide some red meat, but it's not going to get ahead of its skis. That report is the icing on this cake. Now every committee chair knows, absolutely, let's have some hearings. It's totally supportable. It is justified.
Appropriate.
We're going to look at the report. We're going to call the hearings. And one of the members, one of the most experienced members of the House of Representatives in matters of technology, intelligence, the whole 9 yards, Andre Carson has already said there will be hearings. And I think he got ahead of himself there. I have a feeling it was Marco Rubio or Warner that was supposed to say that. But he is the first one to say, yeah, we're going to have hearings on this report. And so it's all coming together perfectly. And so what I say now, and what I'll tell you is this. This is what to expect. The report will be delivered at the end of this week. I don't know why they waited till the absolute deadline. It's possible they may say, look, we need a couple more weeks because of the holiday coming up. It's possible. I don't think there's any chance they're going to ask for some extended delay. We'd already know about that if there were. Too much has already happened. So that report's going to be delivered. They could have delivered it sooner, but whatever. And as it happens, on Friday or Saturday, the Congress adjourns. And so the Intel committee will get, this is the Intel committee. It's not going to everybody, it's going to the Intel committee in the Senate. That's it. The Intel committee is naturally going to review it before the public sees it. They're not going to just give it to the public and the committee at the same time. That's not the way it's done. So they will be able to take it home with them and review it at their leisure. And at some point, I don't think it'll take long, though this adjournment complicates it a little bit. And you got the 4th of July coming up. I don't think it's going to be long before a message is sent out from Marco Rubio. He doesn't have to be in Washington to do this, confirming that the Senate Intel, as soon as we get back to Washington, which it's not going to be that long, will initiate hearings on the UAP issue to review its national security implications. And that's when the press goes, boom. That's when all of this press interest and all the reporters that have written articles, and I'm following them all, they go to the next level. And that's when things start to get really intense as we wait what could be weeks for these hearings to begin. Enough time to build up a really large audience, and every single network and every cable news network will indicate, oh yeah, we'll be covering this, gavel to gavel. All right. And so by the time they hold them, I think a couple 100 million people will be all ready and ready to go. And so that is what I think is going to happen. You can watch it unfold. And then you say, well, okay, they finally got their hearings, but is that the ultimate agenda? Well, no, the ultimate agenda is to end the truth embargo, which is the confirmation. It's a capital D disclosure. That's the term that I pressed and initiated way back for very important reasons. Disclosure, the term disclosure, small d, had been put well in play by Stephen Greer, the Disclosure Project, and all he was doing back in the 90s, no question. So disclosure as a term really connected to this issue, that's Stephen Greer. But his use of it was in the small d.
I was thinking about the fact that this disclosure is on two levels, of course. Whatever is going to be released to the public, and then, of course, the classified documentation. Do you think in the classified documentation, they will even talk about the fact that they have, recovered UFOs, alien craft, and basically open up their kimono totally?
I doubt it. No, I don't think so. That's, they're ahead of their skis there. This isn't, in other words, again, remember, I call this a public relations driven extrication project. Mm-hmm. And again, the idea is to get the job done without creating too much mess and creating problems for anybody or any agency. And for them to do that would create some serious problems. They're not going to do it. They'll give them some classified stuff, but they will not go there. So just to close out what I was saying before.
Yeah.
So what I did, my contribution was, wait a minute. This movement, every activist movement has got to have a prize. It's got to have a fundamental goal, well defined. People are running around saying, end the UFO cover-up. How? What would constitute the end of the cover-up? I mean, it was just out there. That's not how activism works. And so I put a capital D on disclosure and started pushing it. And I'm very proud to say that that is now in play. In the articles that are being written, you're seeing it used in that way, capital D disclosure. Very simple, and a simple definition, right? It has to be simple. It can't be complicated. Capital D disclosures when the President of the United States confirms the extraterrestrial presence. That's it. That's all it is. Nothing else. The President says, yes, there's ETs here. Boom, that's capital D disclosure. That has been the goal of this movement. Now, there's tons of other things we want to know. There's plenty more than that. But the simple truth is, we're not going to get to those other things anytime in our lifetime until we end the truth embargo, which requires capital D disclosure. And that's the President of the United States. So that is what they're trying to get to. Okay, you may say, okay, fine. I get that. Why are the hearings so important to that? Why have they always been denied and blocked? Because that is the road to disclosure. And so no hearings, you can pretty much keep it under wraps unless the president does a force majeure, which is, as I pointed before, the presidents have chosen not to do. Why is this way? Simple. If you think about it, these hearings will go on for days. How many witnesses will testify ultimately? Who knows? 20, 30, 40, 50. I assure you there's more than enough to keep the hearings going for months. And it'll be military witnesses, and it'll be national security focused. And you'll see, obviously, stuff like the Nimitz event, the Roosevelt event, and other similar events and all the pilot stuff. You'll see that. But one of the most key elements of these hearings, without question, long overdue, is that finally, the SAC base officers who experienced and witnessed the shutting down of our nuclear missiles by these craft while they hovered over the SAC base, they will be able to testify finally under oath. And that probably is the ball game in any event. So the testimony goes on for days and days. Hundreds of millions of people are seeing it. So they're getting the information. And they're feeling the truth. They're feeling the transparency of it. They're very pleased about this, very happy. The public is getting what they wanted for a long time. The president is, of course, paying attention as well. And so what the hearings allow, this is the ultimate goal of this public relations maneuver, is to be able to do something that no president has been able to do to date. And that is to go before the American people and say this: my fellow Americans, like you, I have been watching these extraordinary hearings before the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, and the Armed Services Committee, and so forth, for these many days. It's compelling. After communicating with my top people at the Pentagon and congressional leaders about this testimony, we have arrived at a consensus that I can confirm to you today, that the evidence clearly demonstrates that some of this phenomena is off-world. It was not built, nor is it piloted or controlled by human beings. It is by others, not born on this planet. We have an extraterrestrial presence. Now, you see the beauty of this? That's a whole lot different than a president that punches through, right? And goes and gets the information by threatening to fire everybody, or just gets up one day and decides it's time to end the truth embargo and goes in front of the cameras and tells the world, the American people, yeah, there's ETs here. We should have told you sooner. Sorry. You see, that's not good public relations. That's damaging. That's a huge problem. But when the president does this, and of course, Biden is ideal here because he's really stayed out of this issue for 47 years, but he knows about it. Why? Because he has very strong connections to the Clinton team, the Clinton political team.
It's like a major desensitization process that's going on. You know,
desensitization. It's an acclimatization process.
Yeah, Yes.
You're getting acclimatized to it. You're getting used to it. That's always been going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it allows the president, and what are people going to say? Why didn't you tell us sooner? And he just said, look, the evidence has finally been presented under oath. I watched it. You watched it. It convinced me. Well, didn't you think it was true years ago? Well, I thought about it, but I couldn't arrive at a conclusion so strong that I would suddenly make that the key point of my political career. Whatever. They pretty much everybody has got a reasonable explanation to the initial questions and concerns that are going to emerge. Now, having said that, so at that point, the To the Stars Academy, Mellon, Elizondo, Justice, all of them go down in history. Medals of Freedom are probably going to come into play at some point. Pulitzer Prizes will be given out. Some not made yet, some already made, already earned, I think. And we move into the post-disclosure world. So the job has been accomplished. We finally ended the truth embargo. And then things start to get more difficult. In other words, it's one thing to manage the ending the truth embargo. Managing the post-disclosure world is going to be a lot tougher, but the point is it will be
the next step.
The worst of it will be, the worst of the post-disclosure world for government will be somewhat mitigated. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, that would be true either way. Not exactly. You see, there's another way this can go down. Our president, the Congress may not move fast enough. It may have delayed too long. Another head of state could end the truth embargo tomorrow. And in which case, our White House, our president, and the Department of Defense and everything else are completely holding the bag. And so the public relations, I'm sorry?
No, it's totally true. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
The public relations problems now are massive. And then the post-disclosure world comes, and the sympathy for our politicians and our military intelligence complex will be zero. And it's just going to be a god-awful ordeal. So they have to keep that in mind. For anybody who wants to drag their feet any further on this, they need to get this done. It's one of the reasons I think they will. They're not stupid. They know this. Because, and here's why I'm saying that. The list of things that will come out in the post-disclosure world eventually is a very long list. And on that list are some real stink bombs. I mean, real public relation nightmares. And right near the top of that list is not just contact, but possibly military simulated contact. Also contacted people in government.
False flag.
And so, well, not false flag. I'm not saying false flag. I'm saying that the military contact, if it happened, was not a false flag, but rather it was a logical attempt by the government to try to find out what the hell is going on between human beings and these ETs. Now, if the person was a classified member of the Department of Defense and they're a contactee and they came forward, well, they could deal with that, right? And try to find out what's going on. It's all very safe, all very classified. Though I think a lot of people, most people would be very reluctant to go to their colonel and say, you know, did I mention to you that I'm a contactee? But there's a lot of, but they're probably more interested. Look, yeah, okay, so fine. We have some contactees in the military and we're briefing them and it's all very good, but we would love to know what the hell the ETs are saying to the civilians out there. And how do you do that? I mean, do some Air Force officers walk up and knock on your door and say, we've sort of learned that you might be a contactee. Could we sit down and chat?
I think they're already doing that. I think they are already doing that. I mean, there's been a lot of the experiencers in the OPUS online support group, which we have over 200 people in it from around the world, saying that they have been visited by people and asking questions.
Wait a minute. Are you saying they were identified? They were visited by people who identified that they were from the Air Force or other government services asking for information?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
And so they were okay. And by and large, did these encounters go relatively well in the sense of the quorum? And in other words, we're honestly trying to find out some information, and we appreciate that.
Well,
How did that go?
it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. There's been
Okay.
some that were threatening, you know, asking questions in a manner that made the experiencer feel uncomfortable. But others were supposedly it was a better situation, and more of just asking questions in a civil way, and trying to ascertain, more information on what happens. But a lot of the things that have occurred have been more in a threatening vein,
Okay.
unfortunately.
What was the time frame for these reports? When did they happen roughly?
Oh, they've been happening for years.
Yeah,
I mean,
but the ones that you know about that people in Opus have told you, what time frame? How far back do those reports that you've gotten go?
oh, they go back 50 years, 40 years, 30. It's broad brush. It's
Okay.
over a vast period of time. I don't
Okay.
have anything. I don't. Most of the people in the group, from age of about 30 up to 70. So that's
Isn't it
the
also the
range.
case, though? Isn't it also the case that like there's some exposure there? In other words, I'm sure some of these people talked about it, complained about it, mentioned it, so it kind of puts it in play. Of course, the government can just deny it, but it does provide some exposure to the government in
Well,
terms of its engagement of the issue, doesn't it?
it gets even more intricate because the military supposedly has been following people, and they seem to understand some of the technology via implants as a tracking device. And that it may not be just the extraterrestrials implanting people, but also the military. But they usually somehow understand, are able to follow incidents, and in some way that, of course, I'm not familiar with, but they seem to be able to zero in on the experiencers.
Okay, let's parse this out.
Mhm.
You've enlightened me here a little bit. Okay, so direct engagement by identified government people have happened, trying to find out a little bit what's going on there, right? Because they definitely would like to know. It's awkward. It's risky, but overall, it hasn't become a big thing. There hasn't been a New York Times investigative piece on this, obviously. Okay, so there's that. But when you go and talk to somebody like that, they're going to tell you whatever they want to or don't want to tell you. So there's some limitations. The MyLab's program of how would you say, emulated contact.
Mm-hmm. Simulated.
It can happen.
Yeah.
What's happening there is they're taking somebody, they're putting them under intense using drugs. They're intensely interrogating them to learn everything they can about their encounter, and then implanting false memories, again, probably with the aid of drugs, so that they would forget or not even remember that they were sitting in a room with military people or government people interrogating the hell out of them. I think they have this ability, and if it's true, you can see why that is a public relations problem. I mean, that's a tough one. But we dealt with that before. I mean, the Tuskegee experiment, whatever.
Yeah.
But they won't have the time frame. In other words, the Tuskegee, they were finally able to acknowledge many years later. We're so sorry. But with this issue, hey, it's going to be out there just like that. And so any inappropriate engagement of contactees in any way by the government is a big public relations problem. There's one. If there's a treaty at all, any kind of a treaty with the ETs, that is a real public relations problem, I assure you. That's going to be a nasty one. And there's others. And so, hey, there's a limit to how far you can finesse this. And I think they recognize that. But remember, this could all be forced out without hearings, without our president being involved. There are other nations that can do this. And so if that happens, they've got no backup. What's the backup I'm referring to? It's this. You tell the world there's extraterrestrials. They're thrilled to finally get the truth. Some are a little nervous, but I assure you, most people are going, oh man, this is great. Wow, man, I'm loving this. Okay.
Yeah.
What more have you got? You know, and they're excited and they're stimulated and just on fire. And then you're holding more hearings, and some of the civilian researchers get to have their day. I believe we will have our opportunity to testify. I think you will be in front of a committee at some point. So will I. So will all my colleagues, unless they really try to screen us completely out. But I don't think social media is going to let them get away with it. And this other stuff will come out. All right. And so, okay, but why is that better? Because, to be honest with you, 7 billion people, roughly, thanks to global communications, the internet and Google translation and whatever the hell, are going to pretty much know about the confirmation of ET presence within 7 days. You'll have to be living in the deepest parts of some jungle somewhere, one of those islands in the Indian Ocean where nobody can visit, to not know, all right? And so when the hearings continue and we start getting into these very difficult areas, the reaction of the overall public, I'm not talking about certain individuals are going to raise their hand and go, I am really pissed off about this, right? That the vast majority of people are going to be, look, hey, look, complicated thing. You were doing the best you can. I realize that's really awkward, and I'd like to know more about it. And I'm kind of irritated that you had a treaty and didn't tell us. But, you know, there's a bigger thing going on here. I mean, what can you tell us about the ETs? What more can we learn about them, right? What's it mean for our future? What does it mean for society? All these fascinating things. They're just not going to be that committed to putting the governments, any governments, because there are plenty of governments that know about ET presence, their feet to the fire and forcing them to walk across hot coals, assuming it goes down the way that I'm describing. And the people that are, in my view, dealing with this from the inside, the ones that are unnamed, and certainly the people like Elizondo and Mellon, they get this. They understand this. I can tell you this anecdote. It's one of my few inside anecdotes. I don't have inside connections. I know that some of the people in the field seem to have scores of them. I don't have many. I've had the odd thing that has turned up that kind of was clearly from an inside that I was given privy to, but not much. But one of them is this, and it's kind of neat. From a source that I trust, I was informed that in the early aughts, and I could go back to this person and get the dates down, but it's not important. The Defense Department put out a contract. I say put out a contract. They engaged in a contract with one of the absolute top public relations firms in Washington, D.C., and we have some big time public relations firms here. Because if ever there's a town that needs a lot of public relations, it's got to be Washington, D.C.
Yes, absolutely.
And what was this contract about? Take your time. Use all your resources.
Okay.
We want a full analysis of how you think disclosure could happen. What are the ways it could happen? What are the optimal ways it could happen? And I think it took them some millions of dollars in about 4 or 5 years, and they finally got the report back. And that would have been probably over 10 years ago.
Wow.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an interesting.
See, the government,
tidbit.
the military intelligence complex are not stupid people. They've got computers that are really good. They are able to game nuclear war scenarios. They have a massive amount of money available to them. And so the idea that they haven't anticipated anything and everything that could take place regarding all of their prized projects, whether it be stealth bombers or ET re-engineering or the files on the ET interrogations of the live ETs that we got, whatever the hell, they have already thought about that, gamed that out substantially. They're not going to be surprised by much. though I think they did get surprised by the TTSA. I think, and that's one of the reasons that you mentioned earlier. The reason that you had these conflicting statements coming out of the DOD and some other things that happened, it seemed, what, was that they weren't given advance notice. I mean, it was the TTSA emerged, and I can tell you, throughout the military and complex, the day after, there was a lot of people sitting at their desk going, WTF? What in the hell? And I'm sure that there were a number of people that were immediately calling in some of their other people and sitting down at a desk and saying, how can we stop this? We got to put an end to this. This can't happen. This is a threat to a national security policy, right? Now, this wouldn't just be anybody. This would be people pretty far down. And I'm sure that they were contemplating, how do we put a stop to this? But they couldn't act fast enough. And the TTSA guys knew what they were doing. Once that New York Times story was out, it was game over.
The old left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Well, in this case, well, look, there's plenty of stovepiping within the military intelligence complex. Everybody knows that. There's tons of stuff going on that they don't know, but everybody is under the same degree of security, and you can't tell anybody, and the punishment's the same. And so while they may not know, they're not worried that that stovepipe is going to suddenly open a flue and hit on, and throw some smoke at the New York Times. Well, this wasn't a stovepipe. This was a private thing. This was something amongst individuals. And so I mean, Elizondo sent some letters to Mattis indicating he was dissatisfied. There's no indication that he sent a letter to Mattis saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to join up with a private organization and we're going to take huge stories to the New York Times. Oh, no. And so they got to the Times. Those stories got out within 65 days. And at that point, anybody inside the military intelligence complex that thought they were going to somehow put a stop to this nonsense, that ship had sailed. So you got to give them credit for that. I mean, that's again, so again, I hope I'm conveying the strategic intelligence behind this. This was not some thrown together thing, let's have some fun after we leave the DOD. No, not at all. They had a game plan. And the only reason that game plan wasn't a slam dunk, which by the way, look, if Hillary wins the presidency, they announce in late November, December, she takes over in January 20. The New York Times articles are out. And between then and maybe a month or two into the presidency, they probably could have raised $25, $50 million on that offering. Maybe 100 million. It would have been the hottest ticket in town. And they've only been exposed for how many months? 4 or 5 months tops. And so, it's like boom, bam, bing, and we're riding the train. We got money, we got this, we made history, blah, blah, blah. It was a fantastic plan, except that another person won the election. And so not only did they have to regroup, but they had to run this thing out over 4 years. And they weren't planning on that, right? I mean, they had to, some people did leave, some people, they didn't call everybody together, though they were replaced. But they had to be exposed to the social media for 4 years. Well, 3.5 years. And you know what the social media can do. And they had to answer a lot of questions, and it wasn't making them any money. But they were committed and they stuck to it, and they're getting the job done. But it was far more difficult than they had hoped. And so that's where I think the encomiums should come. I mean, and it's one thing to start something with a big plan. It's another thing to have it blow up and then make the sacrifice necessary to stick with it for years until you finally get it done. Now, there are people in my field that have been sticking with it for longer than that, not 3 years, not 4 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. Okay. But hey, these are people, unlike a lot of my colleagues, that have all kinds of opportunities, jobs, contracts, big money they could make with those resumes that they had to forego. And once you're attached to the Stars Academy, you're not getting a bunch of offers coming in from high-end contractors about, hey, we'd like to pay you $250,000 a year to come and advise us on this program. No, that's not happening.
No.
So they made that sacrifice.
Wow. Well, Steve, you know what? I, you know what comes to mind with you when I think about you is that Star Trek line that says to boldly go where no one has gone before. And you've been doing this like the Energizer Bunny for years and years and years, and you've stuck with it. And I totally appreciate you know your fortitude, your tenacity, and doing what you've done and you are doing. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today. Um, I mean, it was just fascinating. I mean, I heard a lot of amazing stuff, and I totally appreciate it. You know, is there where are you going to be coming up? You're going to be out in the world here, live and in person somewhere,
Well, I am fortunate enough to be officed in the National Press Building. That's where you're seeing right now.
right?
And so, and my press club, National Press Club, which I belong to, is upstairs, which has all kinds of benefits. In other words, I'm perfectly positioned to be of assistance. And I'm starting to send out feelers to members of Congress. Like, if they'd like to have a little more explanation for all this, I could be of help. I'm not doing formal lobbying.
Mm-hmm.
It's not appropriate right now, but
Mm-hmm.
and of course I'm getting some media attention again, and so I'm going to try to keep building up my media presence. I need to get on some cable news. I need to get on news
Yeah.
programs because it's important that the public also get this perspective. It is a different perspective. It is the message that ultimately I will be repeating most often is this simple message that, look, if you're having any trouble grokking what the hell's happening here, because what this person says and that person says and what the Navy's doing and everything else, and it's not adding up for you, it's like, well, why didn't they go there? Why didn't they say this? Why is this person holding, and all this, right? Because it doesn't actually make sense on its face. There's a lot of disconnects. I can solve your problem for you. Okay.
Perfect.
And here's
Perfect.
how I solve that problem. You have
Well,
to understand two things. The United States government, meaning those within it that have a need to know, have known about the extraterrestrial presence since no later than July of 1947, 74 years, and have been engaging the issue and studying the issue relentlessly without let up. And
mhm.
the ATIP program was not an example of that. That was something else. It was like, but the real research and everything is completely classified. So they've known all along. Plenty of people, including some presidents, have known all along. Okay. And two, the government instituted a national security policy to embargo this issue. They couldn't make it a secret like they do with the stealth bomber program, which would have been nice. It would have been easy. If they could make it a secret, that's fantastic. Unfortunately for them, the ETs were not going along with that particular concept.
Right.
And so you can't make something a secret that keeps turning up in the sky all the time over people's heads. So you can't make it a secret, but you can contain it. And that is what that's another one of my contributions, is the truth embargo. That's what the truth embargo is. So there's been an embargo for 74 years. And what is happening is they're having to come out from under that embargo. If you see that picture, then these things start to make sense. You can understand why they couldn't say that, or they said this, or they won't go that far, and why they're kind of playing with it in all these kind of ways, and why there's, you get it, okay? And why some of the things they say are definitely lying. I mean, there have been a number of lies put out by many of the people involved here. Am I upset? No. Because in order for this to work, they have no choice. In other words, part of the public relations agenda or a protocol is you're going to have to lie your way out of this lie. So now I'm not saying it's all that way. I'm just simply saying that it's necessary to lie some to get out from under this lie. So you're lying for a higher cause. You're lying to get to the truth. Now, that may seem counterintuitive, But if the process must proceed, and you're asked a question that if you give an absolute straight answer to, which is my job, that's what I do. And that's why I don't get a lot of people involved in these things coming around to talk to me, because they know, God damn it, it'd be nice to sit down with Steve maybe and talk, but whatever we tell him, my God, he's going to probably tell somebody else. And they can't be certain if I say off the record, I'll stay off the record. It's not worth the risk. I would, as a matter of fact, do that. But I get it. Okay. I am not gonna lie to somebody about a question. They ask me, do you think there's contact going on? My answer is yes, even if it's some anchor of a news program and I may never get asked back again. And so I get that, but there's a process that needs to go forward. And so if somebody in that group we talked about gets asked that question, do you think there's extraterrestrials here? And they say, absolutely, like Robert Bigelow did. Right? May of 2016. That was a long time ago. May of 2017. May of 2017. But that's Robert Bigelow. In other words, it definitely shook some troops up, and I think it was fully intentional. He knew exactly what he was doing. And so, but a little risky, but nevertheless, that's what he said. Now, if Mellon had said that, if Mellon had been interviewed and said there's extraterrestrials here, it's possible that his access to people on the Hill would have been shut down just like that. And so you got to hedge it. And so when the government, when the leak came back recently, when the New York Times got their second big story, I keep telling the Washington Post, the New York Times is getting all the big stories. You really need to get caught up here. I can help, right? I'm not far away. I'm just up the street. When the New York Times got that second big story, the leak, remember, about the classified section of the report? And they then published it. And what they were told was two major things, very big things. One, you're going to learn from the classified briefing that there is no evidence that we've found indicating an extraterrestrial explanation. That's a lie. It's an absolute total lie. Okay. And then the second thing is that the phenomena that's in play here, that the reports that have been prominent, is not something that we have in our technological arsenal. That's a semi-lie. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? It's very likely. I could believe that the phenomena that's been reported in the Tic Tac events and other events, we don't have that level of anti-gravitic technology. So we don't have that capability. That doesn't mean that we don't have anti-gravitics. We may have anti-gravitic craft reverse engineered from ET crash vehicles, but it's not those. So it's not quite a lie. Now, if they had said that if they had said, look, these objects seem to be operating anti-gravitically, and we do not have that kind of technology, that would have been a complete lie. So you got a semi-lie and an absolute lie, and that's what they provide. Now a lot of people say, well, there should be some legal action here. Later on, somebody needs to sue somebody because the classified people were given false information. It's not going to work out that way. Why? Because it was necessary to. It was not their place to say, yeah, we've got ET technology. No. More importantly, and the people that deliver this report are always going to have a fundamental, and this is intentional, by the way, it's set up this way, a fundamental fallback. Everybody that may end up in front of a hearing over the next 6 months is going to have a fundamental fallback. And what is that fallback? Is that the confirmation of the information for which your question addresses resided or still resides in unacknowledged special access programs. And as you know, Les, an unacknowledged special access program is a program that, one, you have to have the right security clearance. you have to have a special access clearance, and you are not allowed to acknowledge it exists. In other words, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so that is where the vast majority of the government of the United States interaction with this issue and the tech and everything else resides by intention. ATIP program was not a knowledge special access
Right.
program. It was a program put together because three very powerful senators said we want a program, and the DOD was not prepared to tell them to go pound sand. And so they put it together, they made it kind of national security, and they did a little research, but they were humoring them. That is not a criticism. It is not any way to disparage Harry Reid. The man's a hero. Stevens and the other congressmen are passed, unfortunately. It's really a shame. But that's what they did. He did what he did, and they did what they did, and that set the stage for that article in the New York Times. But I assure you, the ATIP program was a tiny gnat on the backside of a massive elephant that represents the government's engagement of this issue. And so they always have that fallback. And when the hearings take place, people say, well, these military people, they can't testify because they can't lie. I mean, they're not going to lie. They're not going to ruin their career. No problem. No problem. They're not going to have to lie, and they won't lie. The members of the committee can ask anything they want, even though there will be some effort to orchestrate the concepts, not politically, but to try to get on the same page, stay within certain lines, certain rules of engagement. That's not unusual, but that doesn't mean that they're prohibited. They can ask anything they want. They can ask some SAC base officer, was that event extraterrestrial? And that SAC base officer could say, Senator, in my opinion, I think it was extraterrestrial, right? That's obviously not lying, and it's also not violating a national security oath.
Right.
But
Exactly.
if you ask somebody on one of those military witnesses, have you worked on a program directly involving extraterrestrial technology?
Oh, different story.
You know what the answer is going to be?
Can't
They're
tell
not
you.
going to lie. We're under oath now.
Yeah.
The answer, or are you involved in an unacknowledged special access program, Colonel, that deals with ET issues? The answer is simple. Senator, that is not a question that I can answer in a public forum. I am happy to answer your question in a classified meeting or classified briefing.
Right.
End of discussion. That's it. So they're covered. Now, in the classified briefing,
That's all.
they may ask the same question, and the person may have a different answer. In other words, that person may say, Senator, I can't answer that question. And the senator will say, why? I'm under arrangements that I cannot answer that question. But he's basically saying, I'm in an unacknowledged special access program, and unless I'm freed up from that, and you're not able to do it, I can't answer that question. But that answer is now coming in a classified briefing. You can imagine what happens if that answer comes in a public briefing. This is not rocket science. We've been down this road before. And so it's not going to be that awful, which is why I, after 11 years of trying, was able to hold, for the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars, the citizen hearing on disclosure, the mock congressional hearing at the National Press Club in 2013.
That was amazing. That was
To show-
amazing.
Yeah, to show everybody, hey,
Yeah.
it'll be kind of be like this. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. Okay. Now, admittedly, we weren't getting into national security stuff, and that wasn't a factor. But anybody that watched those hearings will say, look, if we had something like this in Congress, it's going to be great. People are going to love it. Nobody's going to get hurt. The members of Congress are not going to lose their jobs. That's why I did it. I anticipated it was going to have substantial impact based on and other things that followed it. But that was all predicated on a certain person winning the election. So that didn't happen, but that's why that happened. So Hey, there you go. Les, really enjoyed you're letting me go into this at great depth.
Oh, I tell you, I'm blown away. I love the inside information and your perspective on all of this. This is fantastic. And Steve, how can people help you to do what you're doing?
Well, my website is paradigmresearchgroup.org. Up at the top, there is a contribution link, so that's one way. But I certainly would appreciate any Twitter following. Please follow me on Twitter. Follow me on LinkedIn, and you can follow me. You can follow Paradigm Research Group on Facebook. You can follow me. I'm filled up on friends list, but I have a substantial following list on Facebook, Steve Bassett. So you can follow me there. All of those are helpful. I appreciate that, and keep and if you see my tweets or whatever, please share them, please retweet them, all that kind of stuff, right? Expand the reach, and support others that are follow others that are pursuing this issue. There's a gang of people turning up on the web and the Twitter and everything, dealing now with disclosure, capital D, with the truth embargo, exopolitics. Podcasts are turning up. Support all of them. All right.
It's amazing how much is out there right now. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's really great. And same thing going for our side here at Opus. We have our website at opusnetwork.org, and we have a donate button. And so if you're compelled to hit that button, we'd appreciate it. Because we need funds too. And we all do in this crazy world that we're dealing with.
But let me tell your listeners, your viewers, there are a number of organizations that should and will have, I think, a substantial amount of attention brought to them once the confirmation has come. MUFON. Love it, hate it, doesn't matter. It is going to get a tremendous amount of attention. Opus is going to get enormous attention. Free is going to get enormous attention. And there are other organizations that have earned it and will get it. And they all need to get ready for that, right? Go online and watch all the public relations tutorials you can pull up on YouTube.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Steve, thank you so much. Really appreciated it. And I'd love to have you back, especially after this thing it starts to really percolate with the hearings and the quote unquote disclosure. Will do.
Thanks a lot. Okay,
Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.